All right, I think we can start now. Welcome everybody. We are very pleased that we are opening today a new session from the ABIS Horizon Europe webinar series that we commenced in November 2020. After two sessions in the 2020 that we introduced the novelties of the Horizon Europe, and later we focused on the basic fundamentals when deciding whether to apply for an EU funding and how to take the first steps. We decided to bring you two more sessions now in April that will also broaden your knowledge in EU funding. And we believe that the two planned sessions that we have today on impact and dissemination and next week on exploitation of the project results will be helpful for you when preparing the new calls for proposals for Horizon Europe, but also for improving and maximizing your impact of your already existing projects. And so why impact, dissemination, and exploitation? The Horizon Europe is introducing a new approach to impact. So there will be more importance and they will be stricter in assessing whether the pathways described in the project proposals are credible and will lead to achieving the expected outcomes and impacts that were specified in the work program of the European Commission. They will also be evaluating the scale and significance of the contributions and the quality of the measures that are set to maximize the expected outcomes and impact in the dissemination, communication, and exploitation plan. With this, the European Commission wants to increase the real-life impact of the funding that it provides so that it has long-lasting benefits to the society, economy, and science while accelerating the transitions toward greener, more resilient, and digital Europe. On top of this reason, already many proposals fail to actually get funding because they inadequately address these sections. And as mentioned, it will be even stricter for the new Horizon Europe calls. So today's speaker is Andrea Di Anselmo. He's a founding member and vice president of Meta Group. He has a background as civil engineer and research experience in material science at the Storrs University in Connecticut in the USA. Andrea has more than 30 years of experience in innovation, support, and company creation. He participated to international assignments in influencing strategic support and company creation. And he was a member of the board of directors of international associations, regional development agencies, research institute, business angels networks, seed fund management companies, and SMEs. His most recent professional experience takes place at international level and in supporting uptake of innovation, use of R&D results, and coaching teams willing to bring their ideas to market. So before we start, and I will ask Andrea to share his screen, we will have 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A by the end of this session. So you will be able to type in the questions in the chat. So please keep the questions going. Also during the webinar, some of the questions we might actually bring to our speaker during his presentation so that it's more interactive. Our chat facilitator, Jason, will gather them. So without further ado, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caterina. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to this section. Caterina already did a great job introducing the topic and myself. This is something extremely relevant for the future, but for us coming from the research environment, and for us who are used to apply to FP7 and previous framework program, it's also something difficult to frame in the proper way, especially at the proposal level. And I will try to guide you through, let's say, the approach we need to have when preparing the proposals. And I will also try to guide you through the novelties of Horizon Europe, having in mind that these are real novelties, because the grant agreement for Horizon Europe has been published just, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we are working and discussing things which are really, really innovative, just to use a term which is abused. A few words about my company, because Caterina already said a lot about myself. What I would like to highlight is that as Neta, we have been working since, I would say, 1994 on the issue of bringing knowledge to market. And we have been working a lot, at least for 12 years, with the European Commission on supporting research teams and entrepreneurs in going to market with their research results. We have been meeting thousands of them. We have been working with thousands of projects. And something I would like you to keep in mind is that the European Commission launched last September a new service which is called Horizon Results Booster. I will tell you something later on, which provides funded projects with access to experts in order to better tackle exploitation and dissemination. So this is something to keep in mind if your project will be funded in order to get additional support. And this is a large framework program contract which has been, let's say, awarded to a consortium which is led by us. So what I'm going to tell you, it's based on the experience of previous framework program and on what we are learning in these days on what is going to be Horizon Europe as far as dissemination is concerned and as far as impact is concerned. Caterina already introduced a little bit of background. What I would like all of us to have clear in mind is that the European Commission is investing in the production of new knowledge. And as a return of this investment, it is expecting that results produced are used and generate an impact. And it's very, very important that we understand that the grant we get is not a subsidy to our salary, but it's an investment made by all of us to make sure that our results will have an impact and change the market, the society in the future. So it's not a curiosity-driven approach, but it's an impact-driven approach. I would like now to show you what is meant for impact in Horizon Europe. Caterina introduced some new terminology, impact, outcomes. Let's try to understand what it's really meant. Impact is the long-term effect produced by our project on society, including environment. You know that now the European Commission has this strong focus on the Green Deal, on the society, on the economy, and of course, on science. The long-term effects are referring to what is stated in the work program under the specific contribution heading. And they will be described in the part called destination. What we need to understand is that impact is enabled by the outcomes of the investment, of the grant, and we will see what outcomes are. And the most important thing, impact happens, takes place occur after the end of the project. Even better, some time after the end of the project. It's not something that most probably we will achieve during the project. And as it was said, impact has to be the largest possible. I provided you the same example, which is offered by the European Commission. And it says, first of all, impact has to be measurable. So we need to provide amounts, quantity, numbers to allow the benchmark, to allow evaluator to understand how wide the impact is going to be. So in this case, impact is going to be increase of passenger capacity of airports of 15%, 28% reduction of infrastructure expansion costs. We can all understand that this is something that is not going to happen within the project life or soon after. Outcomes. This is something new. You wouldn't find outcomes in Horizon 2020. Outcomes are the effects of the project results on the medium term. And outcomes can happen either during or shortly after the project end. The ones of you who are familiar with demo plans, pilot plans, an outcome sounds like the pilot plan, the demo plan. And of course, the results are the ones that contribute to the outcomes. And of course, dissemination and exploitation are strongly linked with the outcomes. Here we have an example. They say that there are 9 European airports that are going to adopt one of the results of the project. So they are going to act as demonstrators, as early adopters. And of course, our exploitation activity should facilitate the adoption by these 9 European airports. And dissemination, which is going to be the focus of this short workshop, should make sure that the largest possible number of adopters are informed and are informed about the results of the outcomes, the gains and the benefit for these 9 European airports obtained thanks to the adoption of the results. And this, of course, will maximize and foster impact. And of course, all of this needs to be planned, needs to be described into a plan that has to be sound, credible, and doable. And the plan is what is called the pathway to impact. The different steps that will lead to the achievement of the different of the expected impacts. And of course, each pathway is linked to a result and describes how that result will be put into use, exploitation, and this could be a sort of business plan, and how that result will be disseminated, which means how we will inform the adopters about that result and its unique value proposition, and communicated, which means how we will inform the larger public about the outcomes and the impact we expect. All of this needs to be planned. All of this needs to be described in the pathway to impact. And all of this needs to be credible, sound, and doable. This is something that may help us to visualize the relationship in between the topic, the outcome, the result, and the effect. So the target is the topic, the transformation to be fostered, achieved, as in the destination. The bullet hitting the target is the result. The outcome is the medium-term effect enabled by the results. By the result, I would say. And it's clear that if the result is not used, the bullet doesn't hit the target, and there is no effect. If the 9 airports do not adopt the algorithm, there is no way that there is a transformation that can be fostered in the market or in that specific industry. And of course, the effect has to be related to a benefit. A benefit which is derived from the use of the result, and the use of the result should be facilitated, accelerated, and made possible by the implementation of the pathway to impact. Keep in mind this image. We need to demonstrate when we prepare our proposal in Horizon Europe that there is a result and it's clear how this result is going to be used, and it's clear what the outcome is going to be. I would like to present to you this table, which is from the European Commission, that shows what is the, let's say, relationship from the higher policy level down to the operations, which means the level of project results. We are used to look at this thing from top to the bottom. And going from the top to the bottom, this is, let's say, the policy making way of thinking or looking at things. We who are interested in winning a grant, in winning our project proposal, we need to look at this thing when we start writing our application, which in Horizon Europe, as you already know, is going to be even shorter than H 2020. We need to start thinking on a totally different way from the bottom to the top. Having a clear idea how the project results, which is a piece of intellectual property, a service, a new device, that will reach the level of the proof of concept, the level of a prototype, demonstrator, whatever, depending on TRL, how the project results contribute or lead to outcomes as described in the topics, and how that outcomes, thanks also to dissemination and communication, will be maximized in order to achieve the larger possible impact. This is again another scheme that I found interesting, that allows us to frame our, let's say, logical framework, or even better saying, allow us to understand how we should better organize also our work packages, and specifically our dissemination, exploitation, communication work package. We have on the left all the typical result development activities, which leads to project results. In this case, for example, the demonstration of that specific system on a small scale, like 3 airports, and then how, thanks to the pathway to impact, which means how we are going to arrange and deploy dissemination exploitation, these results generate an outcome, which means additional 9 airports that, thanks to accessing the demonstration trial, decided to adopt the system, and how from there on, thanks to the sales or the licensing of that specific system, other will adopt, reaching the impact which is related to increasing the passenger capacities or having a reduction of costs in the 9 European airports and on a larger scale. Pathway to impact is connected on how we maximize impact, how we make sure that this reaches out the large possible users. And this is thanks to dissemination, exploitation, and communication. I rather say exploitation, dissemination, and communication, because if you don't have a result which is going to be used, you don't have anything as a base of an information campaign, a dissemination campaign. And this dissemination, exploitation, communication needs to be planned. But what is important, and this is for the first time in history, is that a plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication is a mandatory project deliverable, which needs to be produced on the first 6 months of the project life and needs to be updated and further developed up until the end of the project. This means that when we prepare activities and we describe activities in the dissemination exploitation work package and communication work package, we need to have it clear in mind how we will do not just the first draft, but the update. And this has to be, again, sound and implementable and credible. What is also important is that the consortium agreement needs to have a clear identification of the ownership and how the new knowledge is made accessible to others. And something that is always missing, or was missing in the vast majority of Horizon 2020 project, is that in the final report, the ownership and percentage of ownership, if it's a joint ownership, has to be listed and indicated in the final report within something which is called results ownership list. This is something that was not in the previous Horizon 2020. Now I would like just to highlight, because this is very important, because we sometimes make confusion, that exploitation is not dissemination, and dissemination is not communication. Happen very often to confuse exploitation and dissemination and communication. Let's make sure that we have a clear picture of what they are, not to confuse it. And then in the next webinar, my colleague Lorenzo Barabani will focus on exploitation, while I will just spend more words on dissemination. This is something that applies or applied to Horizon 2020. And it's useful to clarify the difference in between these three key components or three leverages to maximize impact. Okay. Exploitation is how to make concrete use of results or to facilitate the use of results. So is the list of activities that will lead us, for example, to a licensing agreement with somebody, or to the commercialization of a product or the provision of a service. So it's how that result is going to be used. We'll explain this. Dissemination is how the results are going to be communicated to the early adopters and key target groups, to the potential customers or users of that specific result. Communication is targeting a larger type of audiences, multiple audiences like citizens, the wider society, because it's more informing about the project, and it's, let's say, larger impact. Dissemination is a very targeted action aiming at potential adopters, users of the results, aiming at informing them about the unique value proposition of that result in order to foster its use. And this is why it's very, very important. And this is why it needs to be planned, and its channel needs to be well defined. And if I have to give you a suggestion, once building the consortium, it's very, very important to make sure that you have on board the right partners to make sure that dissemination is efficient and effective. So you should not concentrate only on scientific partners, but also on partners that can play a key role for dissemination activities, and partners that can help you out for exploitation in order to create the bridge from the knowledge development into the use by the early adopters. And this is very, very important. Winning proposal, it's also based on the right partnership, and the right partnership, if we want to generate impact and make sure that there is an outcome, needs to have on board partners who are not just scientific ones or not just SMEs that we added for the, let's say, purpose to test the result and do the validation. This is something that's been developed for Horizon 2020, but it's a good let's say, table to understand how we should organize dissemination, the relationship in between disseminating a result and making sure that a result is used, being a result, a product, a service, a standard, and of course, used because we have a licensing agreement, a service contract, or a sales contract, or a contract research agreement. Disseminating, making available results means that we have the possibility to, let's say, diffuse information on the results to scientific publication, but also thanks to marketing materials, or if it's about something connected to policy issues, a new policy measure with policy briefs. And of course, we can use workshops, we can use demonstration plans in order to showcase that result. And of course, that result can also be promoted using as a channel online repositories or matchmaking platforms, can be illustrated to potential users and customers at trade fairs, or demonstrated with a pilot plant. Just going through the conclusion with some examples. This is again from the European Commission, starting from the results. In this case, still the airport case. There is a new algorithm which is developed to have a better management of the airport passenger flow. This model, it's validated, tested in a demonstrator within 3 airports, embedded in a forecast system. And we that developed this algorithm, this model, which has been embedded in this system, we are going to facilitate the use with a licensing sort of agreement. Of course, after that, the model has been protected. And we will do the dissemination using as a channel publications, sectoral publication for the industry with an article. And of course, we may communicate about the outcome and the impact of this result at some event in a shopping mall in order to reach out citizen and civil society. So exploitation, how we facilitate use; dissemination, how we inform the key target groups; communication, how we make aware the civil society. And the idea of an event and a shopping mall to reach out citizens gives us a good picture on how communication should be arranged and the difference in between dissemination and communication. So the outcome are the 9 European airports, and the impact is what is produced by adoption of the system by the 9 European airports and much more. This is another example with another sort of result. Electronic circuit, an electronic circuit with, let's say, lower energy consumption, or for example, with a lower impact on the environment. Exploitation is still licensing, because especially if the result comes from the R&D environment, licensing is the preferred route towards use. And in terms of dissemination activity, it's again participation to sectoral events and conferences, a matchmaking platform that will allow this type of circuits to be promoted and sold. And for example, participation to some European Commission sort of activity for, let's say, project portfolios, project groups, in order to be more efficient and effective in informing the target groups. The outcome, of course, is that a big electronic company, Siemens, whoever, adopts this new product. And in terms of impact, in this case, is not quantified. but there is a new market for new devices, or the better impact of the industry on the environment. I would say that this sort of example is not the best example, even if it's an example from the European Commission, because it does not provide quantification as the previous one. And it's very, very important, please keep in mind, to quantify impact and outcomes, because this will give the evaluators a clear idea of the project capability, the partner's capability to make things happen. And as I was saying before, this has to be coupled by the right composition of the consortium, where you have both scientific partners, commercial partners, but also partners that are able to enable dissemination to reach out the largest possible target groups and to help you out in using the results and in finding the best use model or business model for the exploitation activities. Keep this in mind. No use, no impact. If we fail to demonstrate how the result will be used, how it will contribute to the outcomes, and what will be the impact thanks to the adoption of the result. If we fail to do this, there is going to be no use, no impact, and no grants, because the evaluation committee will look at impact and we look at the plan, at the activities that we are proposing to achieve impact. And if we fail to be clear and sound there, no way we are going to get the grants. Something which is very important for dissemination and for generating impact is the capability to raise additional funds right after the end of the project in order to bridge the end of the project with other activities, actions, which are needed in order to make sure the outcomes and impact are reached. And a typical activity is the pitch, which is a short presentation in front of people who is able to provide us with resources and funds. We, as part of the scientific community, usually are very good in scientific communication, are extremely bad in delivering a pitch, in convincing or attracting the interest of potential funders or investors. And this is a very important activity that I strongly suggest to take into consideration for our dissemination, exploitation, communication plan. And to conclude, support on how to pitch, plus other kind of support are made available by the European Commission for FP7, H2020, and in the future for Horizon Europe projects, free of charge by the European Commission. You can have a look at this service, the www.horizonresultsboosted.eu website. Service can be requested there, can be selected a la carte. And please take advantage There are going to be 3,000 services available up until the end of 2024. And they are going to be extremely useful in order to integrate with external resources, knowledge, and expertise, your plan for exploiting, disseminating, communicating results. This was mostly what I wanted to say. I just want to raise your attention on a last message coming from the European Innovation Council about the need not to consider just the science and the technology, but also the market and the business dimension. And according to the different maturity stage of the result, which means the TRL reached at the end of our research project, that then we generate outcomes. It's very, very important to take into consideration the need to involve early adopters, early customers in the, let's say, result development process, because that is an interactive and iterative learning process. It's important to take into consideration the presence of validation activities and demonstrators. We already saw that demonstrators could be the result of a Horizon Europe project. And of course, to take into consideration commercialization, because if result is not used, there is not going to be any impact, and be ready to apply for further round of funding and investments. That means make sure that in the work package we describe how we're going to make sure that our results are going to be investment ready. They are going to be at the right level of development, and that we are going to collect the needed information and to perform the needed validations in order to be able to attract an additional round of funding. Because by the end of the project, as it was said, it will be not, in most of the cases, we will never reach the outcomes that we expect, and we will need additional funding to make sure that outcomes happens. So this was it. It took a little bit more than planned. Please consider that this is extremely new information, extremely new material. So it's still very fluid and liquid. And so I expect that there will be also questions and clarifications, which in some case I may not even able to answer, because this is still something that has to be further deepened and validated and developed.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this insightful presentation. I think it was very clear and you provided with a lot of knowledge to our network and with a lot of practical examples. So I can see that we already have few questions, but keep them going, write them in the chat, and we have few minutes to go through them. So not to take too much time, because I also prepared some questions from our network's interest, but I can see that we have not so much time. So let's just go through the questions that we already received.
Caterina, do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please. Yes, so that we can see each other.
Yes.
Perfect. So I would like to ask Jason to present us with a few questions that we already received.
Fantastic. Thanks, Katerina, and also thanks, Andrea, for giving us a really nice insights to research and dissemination. So first of all, there's a question from Julia, and she asks if you could give some similar examples of result exploitation, dissemination, communication for health-related projects. Because she particularly identifies that the problem there is always the implementation in healthcare. So just wondering if you have any experiences on this.
Okay, I always, health is complicated. It's complicated because we tend to confuse in between customers, so target groups for dissemination, and users, the one who will benefit from the technology. We have been working a lot, for example, also in biotech, but also with the assisted AAL program, where we have elderly people affected by dementia. And there, a result could be, for example, a device to monitor the status of the patient. And the way to exploit the result could be, for example, either selling the device or licensing the software that manages the device. Dissemination is going to be activities where we inform the owners of the clinics about the presence of this device, or it could be, for example, participation to trade fairs where equipment for this kind of clinics are showcased. And of course, communication could be an action, as it was said before, even a program on TV where we showcase, for the sake of everybody, how this new technology improves the quality of life of the people with dementia. But what is important is that dissemination goes with use and adoption of the technology. It's like, for example, if you have a new formulation in order to reduce obesity. Dissemination goes towards the pharmaceutical companies that may license the new formulation from you. Communication addresses the overall population, showcasing the weight reduction that you can obtain thanks to the investment in research and innovation done by the European Commission, who allowed the identification of a new formulation.
Thank you, Andrea. Jason, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have another one. So thanks, Andrea, for that. The next one is from Mireia, and she asks if when she has conversations with citizens, NGOs, etc., who have the potential to shape and inform different parts of the research project. So are these conversations that she has a part of the exploitation, or is this a completely different thing that should be a part of a different section?
As I can understand, this, if it has to shape the result, this is part of, let's say, the co-development process of the result. And this is why it's very important to integrate user and customers in the development part of the innovation, in the co-development component. But then once the result is in the process to be developed, then you have, for example, to have a minimum viable product that you use to test with potential customers in order to understand the unit value proposition, and then use the unit value proposition for exploitation purposes. And you do the validation of the minimum viable product with early adopters. So the ones who are supposed to buy or adopt the result, So it's important not to confuse the engagement of whoever stakeholders to co-develop the result with the activities and actions we need to make sure the result is adopted by the early adopters in order to have an outcome.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think that's really nice in showing how different people adopt innovations at different stages. So I advise really the community out there now participating to really look into that. We have another question by Stelianos, and this is moving towards impact now. So he asks, in quantifying long-term impact is always difficult. So how well does he need to justify the expected impact? And what is the suggestion in building causality between results, outcomes, and impact?
Nothing is given for granted. We know that there is uncertainty, and this is why there is always a risk in between. So of course, we provide estimations based on our expectations and projections. The best way to have estimations which are sound and credible, because an estimation could be only sound and credible, is to make sure that within the partnership, we have the right partner stakeholders that knows the industry, knows the problem, or represent industries that are going to be part of the target groups, and do the estimation with them at the time we are drafting the proposal. This is why I say drafting a proposal, even if it's 50 pages, is something that takes time and resources. And if we want to be successful, cannot only be in the hands of, let's say, the scientific component of the partnership, but needs to embed also, let's say, the impact part. And this is why an association like IBIS is very important. And this is why, for example, companies like Neta are also useful within a partnership.
Thank you, Andrea. I see we're running out of time, but we have just one more question. I hope that's all right. So for the final question, Andrea, so it comes from Alessandro, and he's asking if it's acceptable for Horizon Europe to use the logic model or theory of change. And if for those who don't know, the theory of change in the end aims to create impact by its model. And then, yeah, you can elaborate more on that, I believe.
Now,
yeah,
we can use whatever we want. It's not the theory or the methodology we use that makes the difference, is how we implement and operate the technology, is how good we are in describing in the proposal, how in operations we will do that, and how good we are in making sure that this is clear, credible, doable within the time frame of the project, within the resources devoted to the project, and thanks to the partners that forms the consortia, having in mind that we need to reach clear outcomes and generate impact has to be quantified and let's say not too ambitious and not too low. So whatever we use, not an issue, as long as we know how to use it and how to make sure that it generates an impact and make possible to use that result.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We are out of time, so we will conclude, unfortunately, now, although we would be very happy to continue this discussion in the Q&A session. But do not worry, because for everybody, we will be having another session next week that you can register to. There will be a link in the chat very soon. So it's going to be about exploitation of project results by Lorenzo Barabani, who is the consultant as well in Meta Group. So we're very happy that we are collaborating with Meta Group on this webinar. I would just like to also let you know that the presentation slides from today will be available to you, and also the recordings. So we will send it out tomorrow to your email addresses. The same for the next week's session. If you know already that you cannot make it, you can also register, because to all registered people, we do send the recordings exclusively. We are also inviting you for our Knowledge into Action Festival. This event is a unique opportunity crafted for our members to harness the emerging developments into circular economy, inclusive capitalism, and value-centered models, as well as insights on future learning paradigms that are needed to support the sustainability transformation. This event takes place from 27th to 29th of April, and each day there will also be an interactive session that will be great for discussing your ideas on the matter, learning from others, and networking. And you can find the full program and register at the link that will be also provided in the chat very soon, if it's not there already. I would also like to ask you if you have 2 minutes to spare. We would love to hear your opinion on the webinar series and on today's session on impact. So please fill out our survey. You can also find the link in the chat, but it will also be sent out to you right after this webinar on your email addresses from Eventbrite. We would really appreciate it, as we're always striving to be better and better and to bring you the best possible value. And lastly, I would like to thank our wonderful speaker, Andrea. Thank you so much for interesting insights and the knowledge that you brought to us today. And thank you to us, to the participants, to all of you for joining us and being interested in today's session. We will hopefully see you soon next week, the same time on Wednesday, the same day, with Lorenzo Barabani on exploitation. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you next week.
Bye-bye, enjoy.